All right, I'm going to go ahead and get us started, and want to be mindful of everyone's time here. And so let me just say a few words of introduction, and then we will get along the way. This is meant to be a practical session to do a little bit of hands-on thinking here. Take a little bit of time and try to think big picture about some specific goals that you might have or that you might want to think about in terms of the outcomes you're looking to get out of your graduate program here. My name is Matt Kleffenstein. I am the Assistant Director of National Fellowships. My primary responsibility is working with graduate students who are looking for fellowship and grant opportunities that come outside of the university. But I'm also part of the Graduate Student Resources Hub, an initiative between my office and the Graduate School and the Career Center, where we look to promote opportunities for professional development holistically for graduate students. And so as part of that effort, I'm leading tonight's session, focusing on this particular topic. I am going to go ahead and share my screen here. And please, if you have questions along the way, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'll do my best to keep an eye on that. If not, I'll certainly make sure that you have time to discuss it at the end. I'll also be sharing the slides of tonight's presentation along with some materials that I'll be distributing a little bit later on to go along with this here. And I'm happy to follow up with anybody individually about anything that we discuss. Let's go ahead and get started here. For online, we don't need to sign in. Let's just start with the larger context of what I want us to be focusing on here, which is thinking about making the most of your time in graduate school, particularly with a focus on the professional development activities, because there's a lot of things that you can be doing in your graduate studies. I'm sure we have a range of programs and degree types represented here, perhaps master's, perhaps doctoral. Some might be research-based, some might be professional focused. So some of these things will be adaptable, will have to be adapted slightly depending on the type of program that you're looking at here. But regardless, graduate school provides a lot of opportunities to gain different types of skills and experiences. And one of these things to keep in mind is that some of these are skills and experiences that are not necessarily built in to the explicit degree milestones of a program here. There may be opportunities to get involved in different types of organizations or to gain experience in different areas there that are not specifically related to taking courses or completing particular projects or theses and things of that nature, but still may be very important for you to gain experience in depending on where it is that you want to go after this. And really, this is meant to be a practical way to help you think through at whatever stage of clarity you have right now, what it is that you want to do when you finish up your degree here. That might change depending on the type of program you're in. There may be, other things that you're thinking about after a year or so in a program there. That's fine. This is just meant to give you some tools for some self-reflection that will help you continue to discern what it is that you want and make sure that you are taking steps with the time that you have left to maximize the opportunities to gain the sort of things that are going to help you take whatever that next step is going to be here. And so a quick outline of what we're going to look at in terms of the goals and in terms of the topics that we're going to cover. I'll introduce a couple professional development tools that may be useful depending on your field that you can use and spend a little bit more time if you'd like to do some additional reflection or to use it as a way of setting some additional goals and providing some personal accountability. We'll do a little bit of thinking about what it is that you would like to be able to have on your CV or resume at a certain point in your career, and particularly by the time you finish your graduate degree here. We'll start thinking about setting some concrete goals, some goals that you can actually get to work on that will help lead to that end result there. And we'll start thinking a little bit about a multi-year plan of action with a focus on the remaining time in graduate school, but it's something that you can adapt for whatever stage that you're at, for whatever period of time that you have a particular desired end goal to achieve at the end of that. So those are our goals here. Again, the emphasis is meant to be on practical things, to give you a space to do a little bit of thinking about what it is that you want, and then giving you some tools that will hopefully help you have some structure to be able to achieve that ultimate end result. So I've mentioned a little this already, but again, I really just want to emphasize that graduate school is a professionalization process. It can be a lot of things. It can be a space for intellectual exploration. It can be an opportunity to immerse yourself in a particular field or discipline, to gain experience with teaching and all sorts of things there. But it's also something that is giving you qualification that should lead to something else beyond it. And so I don't want to only reduce it to this, but you should think about this as training that you're getting that's meant to prepare you for something beyond this. And so it's important to think intentionally about what it is you want to get out of this experience, whatever your degree program is, whether you're looking at a 2-year master's degree, a PhD program that might take you 6, 7, 8 years. And you should be thinking about what are those milestones in your program here that you need to be achieving along the way, taking quality exams, completing coursework, completing a practicum or a master's thesis or a dissertation. But in addition to that, it's important to not lose sight of the end result, what it is that you're hoping to do whenever your degree program ends. And really, what are the things that you need to do to be prepared to step into that opportunity that you're hoping to achieve? If it's a certain professional position, what will make you a well-qualified candidate for that particular job? If you're thinking about an academic career, if you want to be a professor, what are the sort of accomplishments that you want to be able to feature that will make you a compelling candidate for that? And then what are the things that you maybe don't have right now that you would like to be able to have listed on that CV or on that resume? And how can you go about gaining some of those kinds of experiences there? It's possible that not everything might be something you can do as part of your graduate program, but there may be things that you can. And those are the things that I really want you to think about and to focus on identifying here. So for those of you who are thinking, who are in research-based disciplines, I would recommend 2 tools to you. I think that they could be useful for other fields as well, but particularly if you were doing say a Master's of Science or Master of Arts, or a PhD in any discipline. Imagine PhD and science careers are 2 tools that can help you do a little bit of personal reflection in terms of your own aptitudes and abilities and interests, and help you identify some additional career paths beyond maybe the options that you're currently thinking about there. Maybe you're thinking just about being a university professor, but it could be interesting to know what are some of the other things that people with the same degree, the same training, and the same discipline have gone on to do. And so these are both free tools. You can set up accounts. Some of the materials that I'm drawing on throughout this presentation tonight comes from that. I'll share a resource a little bit later from Imagine PhD that I think is helpful. But if you find this interesting, if you find some of the goal setting that we're going to spend a little bit of time thinking about in a few minutes here helpful, these are both places where you can create a profile that will let you set specific goals, let you chart out a personal professional development plan, and let you do a little bit of self-reflection and career exploration as well. And so just be aware, if you aren't familiar with these particular tools, depending on your field, these can be great ways to help open up what those options are, because maybe you're starting out a program right now, and you're not entirely sure what that next step is going to be. Some of you may have a very clear idea. The reason you're in this grad program is because you want this qualification that's going to get you to this position. Others of you might not be in that situation. So wherever you're at in the process, if you're trying to just keep an open mind about options there, or if you're trying to prepare very intentionally for a particular opportunity that you really hope to be able to take advantage of, this kind of reflection can be useful. So the next thing in terms of preparing for this is trying to make sure that the goals that you're setting are ones that you can act on. And so this is a common framework, SMART goals. I suspect that many of you may have heard this before. I don't expect that this is completely new, or some similar types of concepts, even if it's not this particular acronym here. But really the challenge is, how do you move from that big picture goal, this particular position in this company, or being an independent investigator in a research facility or at a university, to accomplishing those intermediate things that are going to get you in that particular position there. You know, to build the publication record you might need to be competitive for an academic job. You know, to build the toolbox of technical skills that you might need for that particular position in the industry that you're hoping to break into or to advance further in here. And so SMART goals are just a way of making sure that those big picture ideas can get grounded in concrete actions where you are able to assess your progress and have some kind of accountability there. So this is just a useful acronym that can let you know, is the goal specific? You know, is it focused enough that you can really measure what it is that you're accomplishing there? You know, get experience with teaching is a very vague goal, but be instructor of record for at least one course before I graduate, that's a concrete goal. It's something that's measurable, the second part there. Can you determine whether or not you achieved that particular goal? If the goal is to teach at least one class, did you do it or did you not? That's not an ambiguous sort of thing there. Action-oriented can really be helpful too, in terms of what is it that you need to accomplish? You know, how a goal should lead to a next step. So again, if the goal is just get experience, that's not really helpful because it doesn't necessarily suggest what it is you should do that to be able to do that. If it's to get an internship with a particular company, okay, now we're getting a little bit more specific. You know, maybe there's an action-oriented follow-up where you reach out to somebody who already works at that particular place, or you apply for a program that you know places individuals with that company there. So something that is connected with a specific action that you can take so that you can keep that momentum going, that you don't just set a goal and hope that it happens, but that you're making deliberate plans for being able to carry it out here. Realistic is important as well. All of you are doing a lot of different things, just depending on the stage of life you're in, depending on the program you're in. You may have a lot of things going on in addition to your graduate studies. You may be working part or full time, have family responsibilities, you know, other substantive activities that you're involved in with, you know, as part of your community or volunteering or so forth like that. So with all of those responsibilities in mind, whatever that looks like in the context of your life, you know, what is it that you're able to realistically take on? And then in the same thing with the time frame, particularly if it's related to things you want to do as a graduate student, are these things you could accomplish with the amount of time you have left? You know, if you've got another 5 semesters or another 3 years or something in your particular program here, are the things that you're hoping to accomplish things that you could realistically do within that kind of calendar time frame? And then related to that time piece, which is really important, is have you set some sort of deadline? Can you set a deadline for it? Making a time-bound goal, even if it's just imposing an artificial deadline that you made up as a way to keep yourself accountable, can be extremely helpful there. So this is just a general framework. We will come back to this and kind of talk through what this process looks like and get you to brainstorm some goals that fit this particular framework. But I just wanted to introduce it here at this stage to get you thinking about the types of goals that are going to be important for planning to make the most of your time in graduate school, and for preparing for what's going to come next with your training. So let's start thinking about what this means in the context of your graduate program here. I'm going to suggest that it's important to plan year by year. We can even get more specific than that. I'll give you a framework a little bit later that'll let you think by semester or months here. But thinking about the time that you have and being really intentional about how you use it here. And the approach that I'm going to employ from this is something that I'm taking from education pedagogy courses concepts here, which is the idea of backward design. If you've ever done a training like with the Center for Teaching Excellence for TA training or thinking about course design, you've probably come across this concept here, which is the idea that if you're planning to teach a course, you should start with what are the learning objectives that you want to achieve at the end of it, and then having defined what those outcomes are, build everything backwards so that it's leading up to those particular results here. So it's basically starting with what the end in mind that you have is going to be. And so in the context of professional development, I suggest, what is that ideal CV or resume that you would like to have at the time of graduation? What are the sort of things that should be on it? What are the kind of accomplishments that you want to be able to list? The technical skills, publications, conference activity, whatever the sort of things might be there. So trying to imagine the sort of things that you hope to be able to have as accomplishments by the time you finish, taking stock of the sort of things you have now, and then identifying a plan to be able to get from where you are now to where it is that you want to be. At this point, depending on your program, depending on what it is that you're thinking about, you may not even know what should that CV look like. What is that resume supposed to be to make me a competitive candidate for a particular type of position here? So if you're in that situation, if you're still trying to figure it out, that's fine. I want you to think through a couple of things here so that you can start to gain a little bit of clarity about what that should look like. One thing you can do is look at the CV or the resume of somebody who has gone a little bit further into the program than you, or perhaps has recently graduated there. I'm thinking particularly of those of you who might be in PhD programs or other doctoral programs here. Think about if you are in early stage, if you're in maybe your first year or second year of a PhD program, think about what sort of things people who are closer to finishing up may have on their CVs, the kind of experiences and accomplishments that they have. Or somebody who's recently graduated from this program or another program that maybe you might have some context or connection with. Same sort of thing with people who have gone on to different professional things. If you're in like the business school, for example, so what are some of the things that people who've earned their MBA have gone on to do? Some of their experiences that they have. If you're interested in the particular industry or specialization that they're looking at there. So as you gain that clarity, that can help you develop a sense of what are the things to start working backwards to be able to achieve. Because if the goal is to have that particular type of experience, now you have a time frame when you graduate that is going to help you figure out what are the things you can do to make sure that you are in that position that you want to be. And again, if you're still in that stage of I'm not entirely sure what I want this to look like, I don't know, what I should be planning for, or the types of skills or experiences that are important, or maybe the exact type of job that I want there. There are a couple different ways to start getting a little bit of clarity about what that can look like there. So regardless of what you're interested in, if you're thinking about a faculty career, if you're thinking about an industry career, if you're thinking about working in the public sector or for a nonprofit, government agency, you can find out information. There's a lot of information that's out there. If you're thinking about an academic career, I would encourage you to start paying attention to job postings in your particular field, even if you're not going to be applying for jobs, maybe for a couple of years there. Look for postings from places like Higher Ed Jobs or sites like the Academic Job Wikis that track some of the previous hiring cycles, or for at least the current year, so that next year you can kind of look back and see who was hired recently for a particular position there. You can also do this by identifying, say, junior faculty members in programs at the types of institutions that you might want to work at. So if you're thinking about it, I'd really like to work for, say, a flagship state institution like the University of South Carolina. What are the faculty profiles of people in the departments that I would be thinking about applying for, who are at this particular stage, who are assistant professors, who maybe are only a year or two into their jobs there? What does their CV look like? And you can do a little bit of backwards investigating and figure out exactly how what sort of things that they had accomplished at the stage that you will be in at the time you're about ready to graduate there. This can be a little tricky because, this might be somebody who's been out for a number of years or has already had a number of significant experiences post finishing their graduate education. But if you look at a document like a CV, you can pay attention to the years of things. See the year that they finished their PhD or other advanced degree, and then look at the other categories that are on there and see what sort of activities that they had that would have had to have taken place while they were still in graduate school. That can give you a sense of somebody who is doing the sort of things that you want to do, what they were like at the stage that you're at right now. And that can be a rough guide to identifying this. You can do the same thing for those of you who are thinking in terms of industry jobs there with information that's available on LinkedIn. Look for profiles and for people who are working for companies that you want to work for, or for people who have earned the particular degree that you are looking for, and particularly see if you can find people who have graduated relatively recently. I think this is really important here. Ideally, you want to find people who are early in their careers, or at least comparable stage to where you think that you are going to be by the time that you finish your degree here. Somebody who earned their MBA 25 years ago, somebody who was a full professor and has been teaching for 30 years, when they got that credential, there was a different labor market. Things have changed, society has changed. It's not quite the same context. And while there may be some useful things you can learn from that, that's really going to reflect a certain moment in time that is now, significantly in the past here. So looking for somebody who has finished their program more recently will just give you a better sense of what current expectations are for that, because those things can change. The qualifications that would have gotten you a particular role 15 years ago are not necessarily the ones that would be appropriate and expected now. And so identifying somebody who's at the right stage, again, relatively recent, graduate of a particular program, early stages in their career, somebody, if you're thinking academic track, who has perhaps currently doing a postdoc or has recently finished one, or again, is an assistant professor or other junior faculty member in the early stages of that process there, they will be a better rough guide to the types of qualifications that people who are getting those types of positions that you might be interested in now have. And that at least gives you a general sense of what are some of the things that you can be thinking about that could be useful for you to have there. If you're at that stage of trying to figure out, what is it that I even need to end up in the particular position that I'm hoping to go into? And so if we're thinking about what this means, especially in the context of anybody who's interested in like an academic job, these are just some common categories that you can think of, you can kind of expect to have for an academic CV. Again, if you're preparing a resume for a particular industry, that's going to look different. But that's where also spending a little bit of time on LinkedIn can be helpful too, or other sites like that where people post resumes and things for hiring purposes. That will give you a sense of what are the sort of skills, expectations, how people are structuring and describing their experiences there. That will let you know what are the sort of things you want to be able to speak to. If you're thinking in an academic context, some things vary according to discipline, but publications, if you're interested in anything that's research-based, funding that you've received, grants, fellowships, awards, whether from the university or outside of it, conference activity, posters, papers, talks that are given as part of that, experience involving teaching and mentoring in your department or through professional associations or student organizations, service opportunities as well, particularly in the context of service to your departments or to your particular program or to the university or to professional associations. Those are basically standard features of any academic CV. Depending on your field, you may list some other types of experiences like language skills, particular technical or research skills. You may have certain professional experiences that would be considered relevant there. Some of these things are going to vary depending on your field there. But these are some general categories that if you need a place to start, you can kind of assume at least the first 5 that I have listed on here as a good starting point. So that's one thing to keep in mind for thinking about how to go about identifying the sort of things that you want to be able to accomplish and the sort of skills that might be useful to have depending on where it is that you want to be going here. And so with that in mind, let's do a little bit of reflection to help you think about what are some of the experiences that you might be interested in. And I'm going to go ahead and share a document in the chat here so that you can do a little bit of thinking through this. And this is a resource that comes from Imagine PhD, that website that I mentioned before that you can use as a way to do a little bit of goal setting and career exploration. And what this document has is it has a variety of different categories and some goals that you could have as a graduate student in it. And this can be a way to help you think about what are some of the big categories where you might want to gain particular types of experience here. So I'll give you a second to take a look at that. Again, I'll send these documents in a follow-up email to everyone tomorrow in case you're on a device where you're not able to access this PDF right now. But I'll just briefly note that the larger categories that are listed on this document are degree completion, career development, skill development, personal development, and then financial and funding related issues. And in each of those categories, there are a large number of examples of different things that could be goals or things that you would want to accomplish as part of your time in a PhD program. Some of those things on there are not necessarily options that you would list like on a resume, but they're things that you would need to do as a step towards that particular thing there. So things like program milestones like forming the dissertation committee, taking qualifying exams, going to a conference, participating in a networking event. Those aren't necessarily individual things you would list on a CV or a resume, but they can be important intermediate steps towards achieving some of those particular goals there. So I will give you a second to look over that, and then I'll also going to send you a separate little worksheet to go along with this that you can think through as well that will help with the process of reflecting on how to set those SMART goals here. So I will go ahead and give you that document. So I can get my screen to work here. Okay. So I just sent another PDF document here. This is a worksheet that has a series of questions on the first page, and then the second page has a different activity that we'll get to at the end of at our session here. But I encourage you to take a look at some of those questions. And starting with some of those big picture categories from the first documents, again, like degree completion or career development or skill development, think about some of those subcategories that you might list as part of one of those larger headings there. So, maybe as a form of career development, you'd like to have teaching experience as a category that you're interested in, or, develop a publication record, or learn coding languages, or gain data analysis skills. Take a minute to identify some of those more specific categories there. And then the other questions are meant to help you reflect on that process of how do you translate those broader areas of interest or those broader areas of expertise that you'd like to have more skills in into actual actionable things that you can follow through with, into setting actual specific SMART goals. And I'll give you a couple minutes right now just to think through this a little bit. Really, this is something that you can take a little bit more time, at some point in the coming days to reflect on in more detail, but this is really just to give you a chance to really start thinking through and identifying some of this. So go ahead and take a minute and look over this. You don't have to have any great profound insights at this point here, although it's certainly awesome if you do. But at the very least, it will hopefully start getting you to identify some of the things that could be useful as you consider next steps with setting goals here. Yes. The question in the chat, I will email the slides out and I will send the two attachments as well. Again, everyone here. All right, so you've had a chance to think a little bit about some of those broad categories of experience here. The next thing that I would ask you to do, which perhaps you've already been thinking about here, is to go from those a little bit broader ideas, maybe general types of accomplishments you'd like to have, and start thinking about how to turn them into SMART goals here, as we talked about at the very beginning there. So if the goal is to gain experience with some publications, what are some specific targets that are quantifiable, that are measurable, that you could have there? Maybe the goal is to publish 2 articles in respected journals. And then the question will be, well, which are the journals that would be a good option for your particular field? Maybe it would be instructor of record for at least one course, or getting experience as a teaching assistant. Maybe the goal is to gain experience presenting your work in professional gatherings there. So you set a goal to present at 1 conference per year, or something like that. I just want to emphasize at this point here that the quantities that you set are really going to vary depending on your particular degree program, or the type of experience that you're looking for, because these can really vary. And this is why it's important to do a little bit of investigating to see, again, what are people who are further along in your program doing? What advice do faculty mentors give you around these sort of things? Again, doing a little bit of CV sleuthing, or resume sleuthing for people who have recently gone into the type of work that you're hoping to move into here. What have they been looking at there? Because especially for anything with like research, publication volume can vary substantially. And that's just a reflection of how research is conducted in different disciplines. If you were a student in a humanities PhD program, if you publish 1 article in a major journal, by the time you're done there, that could be a significant publication record, because just the way that it works, the way the research is conducted there, it's different than somebody who's part of a lab group in the sciences that might have this just the way that process works there's this kind of constant output of materials that are being submitted to journals. The work is often done collaboratively. There are many authors on each sort of thing there. And so expectations for how many authored publications are going to be different. And the kind of questions people are going to ask are going to be a little different too. They'll want to know about author order. Were you second author? Were you first author on that paper there? Journals vary in terms of their impact and in terms of their reputation. So what are the publications that are going to matter? 1 article in a premier journal in your field is going to carry a lot more weight than 4 or 5 articles in lesser or known journals, or ones that are a little less selective. At the same time, it's also a reflection of what journals are the best fit for your research, because you have different specializations, different approaches within larger disciplines there. The right forum for somebody who is doing more of an archaeological approach to anthropology is not necessarily the same thing for someone who's going to be doing biological anthropology, or cultural anthropology, for example. So the targets you should be setting are going to differ, and there's not a universal standard that I can give you and tell you this is what the number should be because you're in this particular field here. At the same time, too, there may be constraints on the options that you might have for some of these. I understand, in many cases that opportunities for teaching are determined by departments. You might not be able to say, hey, I want to be able to teach my own course this year. You may be assigned a course to be a teaching assistant for, or an instructor of record for. So I recognize that some of these things you have more control over than others. But if that's the case, want something with more, if you want to be able to signal that you have an interest in teaching and you can't have control over how many courses there, what are other things that you could set goals for? Perhaps earning a teaching certificate from CTE, perhaps taking particular types of trainings, or participating in a conference related to pedagogy in your field or something like that. So If there are things where you might be constrained in terms of your own ability to be able to seek them out, think about are there other things you could be doing that might still help you gain specific types of experience you could then point to as qualifications in that larger area there as well. Same sort of thing with conferences. There are a lot of factors to think about with that as well. Partly, what can you afford to do, or where are these conferences? Are you able to participate virtually? Is it like a big international event that you would have to spend a lot of money to travel to London to for a week or something like that? Can you get financial support from the university or from your advisor for some of those sort of things? So there are a lot of factors that go into what's reasonable there. But as you take stock of all those different things there, that can help you think about what an appropriate goal would be in your case. Because even if it would be professionally beneficial to present at 3 conferences a year, that just may not be feasible in terms of being able to produce the work for it, in terms of being able to afford to go there. But still, setting a goal that you think that you can actually achieve can still let you get experience in something that can be useful professional development there. So I do just want to really emphasize that there's a lot of context-specific parameters that will mean that what you would set, even if you have the same category of goals, is not necessarily what another person would set because of all of those different things there. But still, the point is, take those big picture categories, whatever they may have been that you've identified, break them into specific tasks, and make sure that you're setting action-oriented goals that have some sort of measurable components. You can know if you achieve them, and in particular, that you've connected them with some sort of deadline, some sort of time frame for that. And the time aspect is what I want to focus on next. The timeline is the last piece of what we're going to be focusing on here, which is when do you need to achieve these things? You know what you might want your CV or resume to look like, or you're starting the process right now of thinking about what sort of things might go on there. But then there's that constraint of when you're going to finish your degree. If the goal here is to make the most of your time in graduate school, when are you planning on graduating? And when do you have other milestones that you need to keep in mind for your degree program here? Is there a certain point when you have to complete your qualifying exams? Is there a semester when everybody is doing a particular project, or that's the time when you're doing an internship or a practicum experience? Is this the year that you're expected to do your data collection? And so forth. Those are all things to keep in mind that can help you determine what your timeline is going to look like. This can also help you identify when you need to start getting work on certain projects there. If the goal is to get a publication, do a little bit of investigating to figure out what does that timeline look like for publishing an article with a particular journal. Academic publishing, particularly in some fields, can take quite a bit of time. It might be 6 months after you submit an article. By the time, if it's sent out for review, you might get reviewer comments. They might ask you to revise and resubmit, at which point then they have to send it out for another round of review, which might take several more months there. And it might be a year or more from when you made that initial submission to when you're told that it's actually been accepted for publication, at which point, depending on the publication schedule, it could be another 6 months or more till when it would actually appear in a forthcoming issue there. Those are the sort of things that you want to be thinking about. So if the goal is to say, I have published this article by the time that I'm on the job market, then when would you need to make that initial submission in order for that to be a realistic prospect? Things like that can be variable. There are a lot of factors that go into that. Sometimes peer reviewers just don't respond, and it really holds up the process there. Some journals maybe are a little less transparent about what that timeline can look like, but this is something where you want to do as much research as you're able to there. And this is something as well where if there's another student in your program who's published with a particular journal, or a faculty member, ask them about what that experience was like, about what that process looked like in terms of the steps that were involved and the amount of time that it took as well. And that'll at least give you a general ballpark time frame to keep in mind there. And that's just a reminder again that you need to think about not just when you want to have that experience listed, but when you need to do the things that will let it take place there, particularly if it's something that's going to involve other people having to do a thing. This is something that's true if you apply for a fellowship or a grant. When is the deadline? When is the cycle for that competition? Is it once every year? Do they accept it with 3 different deadlines, like NIH awards for graduate fellowships? Do they accept them on a rolling basis, like some NSF directorates do for doctoral dissertation research improvement grants? Those are the things to figure out. And then plan for how long it takes typically for that review process. For a lot of fellowships, that's an annual cycle. It might be 6-9 months until you have an answer about whether your application has been accepted or has moved forward to the next stage there. And so if the goal is to have funding for year 3, then you're probably going to need to be applying for that award in year 2, for example. That varies depending on your field, depending on what you're interested in, but figuring out what those kind of schedules are so that you're planning ahead and are not missing those important deadlines is really important here. And one way to do this is to actually sketch out a plan. And that is the second page of the worksheet document that I shared with all of you. And again, that I'll be sending out to everyone tomorrow here. And this is a way of visually representing it. This is the template that I borrowed from another scholar who has some useful thoughts on thinking about how to take your CV and use that as a plan for making concrete goals for a period of time here. The example that I've put together, I've adapted it for the academic year starting in the fall as opposed to the calendar year, but it's really easy to make this sort of chart, and you can plot it out by the semester, you can plot it out by the month, however you think there, but I think it's useful to at least think about semester by semester and month by month so that you can start actually putting in some of those things there. And this can be useful just as a visualization of what the course of a graduate program can look like. And you can adapt it. If you've got 2 years, then make it for 2 years. If your PhD program typically takes 4 or 7, you can adjust accordingly for that. But it's a way to capture in one image what the whole scope of your degree program is going to look like. And that's where you can start putting in some of those target dates there. So if the goal is to have that article accepted or out in press by the end of, say, year 4, does that mean you need to submit it by the summer of year 3? Do you know that you're going to have to take your qualifying exams in the spring semester of year 2? Can you mark that already on your plan there? Those are the sort of things that something like this can really be helpful with in terms of making sure that you're paying attention to that timeline component of setting those particular SMART goals here. And so I would encourage you to, as you're thinking about the goals that you want, as you're setting some targets in here, fill in some of those sort of details that you know about. If you're in a field where you're planning to present at certain conferences, when is that big conference going to take place? A lot of conferences take place the same time every year. So if you know the big conference is always in July, you can just mark that down for those years when you think you might want to do that. If you want to participate in that conference, usually there's an application deadline, a time when paper proposals or abstracts need to be submitted. That's usually many months in advance. If that conference is in June, it might be January when you're submitting that initial abstract or something. That's a great thing to put on your plan as well, so that you can know, okay, January of year 2, I need to submit that abstract so that I can participate in the conference that's going to take place in June of that particular year. So this is a way of again, helping you stay on track and keeping the big picture in mind all in one instance there. Again, this is something that's meant to be flexible. This is something that you can return to and revise, but it's at least a way of providing some accountability here. There are different ways that you can arrange this. I'll show you an example that I made in just a minute here. And I really just want to stress again that this is meant to be something that's flexible. Your goals are evolving, and so it's not like you have to write down a goal and then you're stuck with it if things change. Particularly if you're in a graduate program that might take a number of years, a doctoral program, goals might change. If your degree program is going to take 6-7 years, that's a lot of life experience that can happen then. You might want different things in 5 years than you do right now. Maybe you came in really committed to an academic career and thought that's exactly what I want, but for whatever reason, in a few years you realize, maybe I should be thinking about other options here. Or maybe I'm really interested in this other kind of opportunity. That's fine. you can just reset and start thinking again, whatever stage you're at, however much time you have left, what are the things that you can be doing in that time period towards whatever that new goal is as well. So this is not meant to constrain you in the sense of narrowing or taking away options. It's a way to provide you some accountability, though, so that as your plans evolve, as things come into clearer focus, or as things change, maybe it becomes clear that the original plan, for whatever reason, is not going to work anymore. Maybe there's a family situation. You've got a partner, they're not able to move. Your kids are in school here, and now it's important to the family stay here, and so the job search is going to look a little different. You can't just go anywhere in the world that might offer a position there. Again, that's fine. This is not meant to suggest that those things shouldn't be important factors. But then at that point, you can start making a plan and setting those SMART goals based on what the situation is at that particular point here. So it's meant to be flexible, but again, having a visualization, you can look at the amount of time that you've set for yourself, and you can look at the specific things that you already know you need to do, can be useful for helping you stay on track and just provide a little bit of personal accountability in the midst of all of that. And so just to show you what this can look like, I went ahead, I did this retroactively. When I was in a graduate program, I did do some of these activities and some of this reflection. Personally, I didn't plan it out from the very beginning, all 7 years. So this is retroactive, but I went back and I thought about what were the different stages in my particular program. I have a PhD in history, and categorizing it within different sort of things there to show you what this sort of thing might look like. Again, depending on your degree, depending on your field, this could look very different here, but it's just a way of letting you see what a graduate program in one sort of image can look like there. And so in purple, I put in different kind of public or program milestones. Year 3 was the year that people in my program did their qualifying exams. Year 4 was typically when people did their research, which involved archival work. And so for me, my field was Russian history, so I knew I was going to need to get funding to go to Russia to conduct that kind of research there. So year 3, I spent a lot of time working on fellowship applications there. And so I put in the deadlines for some of the fellowships that I applied for that particular year. And you can see when those deadlines fell in the fall and spring semester to get the funding that ultimately let me do the research that I did in the 4th year there. I put in deadlines for when conferences took place and when submissions were due. I submitted an article in July of my 5th year that wasn't published until April of my 7th year. So that's humanities publication timelines for you right there. But that's the sort of thing where I was planning ahead, and I wanted to have a certain publication in press by the time I was getting near to finishing there. And so I had to start thinking a couple of years in advance to prepare for that sort of thing. Again, this is just one example. Things will look very different depending on the amount of time that you have, depending on the structure of your program. You can come up with whatever categories make sense here, but this is at least one way that you can kind of visualize some of those different things going on. This can also help you figure out, are there certain semesters or certain years that you just know that there's going to be a lot going on? Is there a semester where you're going to be teaching and maybe doing exams or having to work on that dissertation proposal? And that might be a time when it's going to be difficult to work on some other projects. And so you might want to plan around that. Maybe you start working a little bit earlier in anticipation of a conference abstract because you're not going to have time that fall. Maybe you start working on that fellowship application over the summer because even though it's due in early November, that first part of that semester, when the fall starts, is going to be really busy. So this can really help you identify what are some of those key turning points in the program. When are you going to have the time to work on certain projects? Is there a certain summer when you might be able to devote to an internship experience or doing some additional training in certain research skills? Or when would be a bad time for that sort of thing there? So I encourage you, if you find this sort of visualization to be helpful, to use this. Again, I have an example in the sheet that I gave you, but you can always customize this very easily to whatever makes sense for your preference in terms of how you want to organize the time and in terms of the amount of time that you have. But I would encourage you to use the length of your graduate program as the frame here if you're trying to think about what are the things that I want to be able to accomplish by the time that I either graduate or by the time that I start applying for certain types of jobs, which can vary depending on what it is that you're looking for. All right, so because this is the evening, I'm not going to set aside time right now to have you actually work on this, because we're getting closer to the end of our time here. But I would encourage you to start doing a little bit of a rough draft. I would encourage you to take a look at that timeline and think, are there things you know right now that you can plug in immediately? You know that big conference is always in November every year. You know that you're going to have to take your exams in this semester or in this particular month, or that you're going to be teaching during this time, or that you'll have to do your data collection this time. Fill in as much as you have. Think about what are those sort of things that are important, that you can already identify. Maybe one of the things you're realizing from this is that you don't know the answer to some of these questions. That's fine as well. This is not meant to make you feel like, oh no, I'm behind. I don't have answers to any of these questions. That's perfectly fine. This just now lets you know that there's some things that you should spend a little bit of time trying to identify. That can be a useful takeaway from here. If you realize, I don't even know what are the publication expectations in my field, or I don't even know what are the range of technical skills that people are being hired with my particular desired industry there. Well, now you can take some time in the coming days or weeks and do a little bit of investigating to figure out what are those things are and start planning for particular goals that will help you achieve them here as well. Maybe you don't know what the main conferences are. That's a conversation you can have with a faculty member in terms of which ones are important for my field, which ones might be an appropriate fit for the type of research that I'm doing, and then look up that information. When does the conference take place? When are proposals due? So you don't have to know these things right now, but if these are things that are relevant, if these are types of experiences that you are hoping to get to be able to list on that resume or CV, then definitely take some time to be able to answer those, because you'll want to at some point in order to be able to set appropriate goals for getting those particular experiences, to having that CV or that resume that you want by the end of everything. The same thing with funding and publications. What are the journals that might be a good fit? One thing to ask yourself is, what are the journals that you're reading? Who's publishing the research that's important to the scholarship that you're doing? That might be a logical place for you to submit some of those things there. So pay attention to those sort of things. If you realize, oh, all the articles that are really important to the project that I'm working on are being published by these 3 journals, the kind of work I'm likely to do, or the kind of work that I'm trying to do here, would likely be a good fit for all of these, or one in particular there. If you've got questions about fellowships, grant opportunities there, schedule an appointment to meet with me. That's my main job, is to help connect you with outside opportunities, to help identify what would be an appropriate fit based on your research interests, based on your discipline, and a whole host of other questions there, and can provide you with feedback on drafts of applications, can be part of that process of helping you get ready to submit everything and make your strongest case there. If that's something that you're looking to get experience with, take advantage of the resources that are available on campus to help you with that. And then something else that's important to keep in mind is, when do you want or when do you need to start applying for different types of jobs? Depending on your goal, that answer is going to be different. If you're thinking about academic jobs, that's probably going to be the fall of the final year in your program. Or some students in PhD programs, perhaps a year before that, will start applying for some jobs just to get some experience with the academic job application process. And if you start to make some headway there, maybe you try to finish a little bit faster. But if not, maybe you're still returned for another year there. If you're applying for industry jobs, those hiring timelines are oftentimes much, much quicker. So you're not applying for a job in October that you're going to start in August of the next year. You're applying for a job that might start next month. So when are you going to be in a position to actually start that job? Are you in a position where you can actually apply significantly in advance of when you would finish your degree? Or is it the sort of thing where you can start working and then you can still finish up the master's degree that you're working on there? That's going to depend, but that's something to think about. Just knowing that hiring timelines can be very, very different. Some companies have a very quick turnaround. Some have a much longer kind of process. And again, academic jobs have a very unique application cycle that really starts in the fall and runs through the early winter for positions that will start basically for the next fall in general. And so if you're planning to apply for both types of jobs, maybe you focus on academic jobs in the fall of your final year, and then you consider other types of positions in the spring, for example. But that's another factor to keep in mind as you're planning out what are reasonable goals, and what are the skills that you want to be able to have by the time you're ready to start that particular process there. So I hope that these are useful questions to keep in mind. Again, I encourage you to adapt them to your particular situation. I've drawn a lot of examples that come from academic hiring, but I know that that's not everybody's program. I know that that's not everybody's goal, but I do think that the general approach here in terms of thinking of categories, in terms of thinking of particular concrete things that would be featured on a resume or other kind of job documents, and then making time-bound specific goals that can relate to that is a useful approach for whatever field that you're considering going into. And you can use this model for other things as well. The focus here is professional development, so I'm talking about jobs, I'm talking about career type things there, but you can always set goals for any other sort of thing that you might be thinking about in terms of personal things that you're working on, financial goals that you might have, fitness, and whatever the case might be. So this is a framework that can be applied in other ways, even if our particular focus here tonight is on what this means for graduate students and the professional development opportunities that they might want to seek out during their programs. And as I mentioned, there are resources on campus that can help you with aspects of this. I work in national fellowships and help with funding that comes from outside of the university. Happy to be a resource if that is part of the plan that you're working on right now. The Career Center, my colleague Nigel Smith, is a great resource for graduate students there for thinking about career exploration, for thinking about the job application process, whether that's industry or academic, whether it's exploratory or getting feedback on documents or preparing for interviews or salary negotiation. So in addition to the support that hopefully all of you are getting from professors and from your specific colleges and programs there, just be aware that there are resources through the graduate school and through other offices on campus that can help you with different aspects of this process here. And we're always happy to answer questions and to be another point of support, to be another member of your team as you're making plans and as you're trying to achieve the different goals that all of you have. And I just want to flag a couple of the resources that I used in putting together this presentation here. I encourage you, and again, you'll be able to get all these links when I send out the slides tomorrow. I encourage you to follow up with them because there's additional information from all of these different sources that I think can be useful in terms of thinking about how to make plans and in terms of thinking about how to create your own individual professional development goals here. So I definitely want to give credit to these great resources and encourage you to dig deeper if you find this to be useful and are looking for some other things to be thinking with as part of that. All right, I'll send the feedback link in the email tomorrow. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and stop the recording here, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.